everybody, and welcome to the irocknits podcast. I'm back. I hadn't podcast last time because I did a podcast with Amber, so I want to welcome everyone who has come over to join my podcast from Amber and I's podcast that we did together in Virginia Beach. So many people reached out to me and said, thank you for recording together, and we had such a great time doing that, and I just have thousands of people to thank today for their kind comments. So I'm going to just read a few folks. Susanna Warner and Rachel Weisenstein and Nancy Gullins and Janice M. and Dee Thompson and Tami and Lisa and Coneen and So Fun to Sew and Gary's Only Gal and Becky Witt. Who else was on here? Oh, so many of you made just wonderful comments. You asked me tons of questions. I have so many questions to answer today. I'm not sure I can get it all done. Nancy Gullins and let me see, Tara Koss and Kathleen Serpa and Jacqueline Fitzgerald, Jennifer Page, Prudence, you were back, Rachel, Barbara Williamson, Andi, Pat Howes, oh, I wrote so many down, Ann Morris, Delia, Costalena, Ann Morris, Carrie Mountain, Pat, MyPhotoWorld, Yvette, Christy Campbell, Diane Scott, PuffyJo, Cindy Rossner, yeah, tons. So many of you, hi! That's a little crazy to read everybody's names, but it was so much fun to comment back to you and then have a little conversation. Some of you came right over to Ravelry and joined the Ravelry group and left some comments there for me, and you've got questions for Corey. So I spent some time this afternoon answering, and then I finally decided, oh, you know what? I need to get to recording because I have a really busy day tomorrow and I want to get this edited. So I just decided I really needed to get started. First of all, I want to mention that my friend Josh has his podcast up, Dairyland Knits. And if you have not watched Josh, Josh is a professor in Wisconsin at a university, and he is on sabbatical. And so he has taken himself to a location in Pennsylvania where he's doing a lot of studying, but he's off social media. And while he's there for this semester, I believe, and maybe even into the summer, he posted a podcast. And I watched it, I don't know, a week ago, 2 weeks ago or so. He makes me laugh. I love you, Josh. I've spent quite a bit of time with Josh because he's fairly local to me in person, and he said something on his podcast like, well, that just melts my butter. And I thought, I gotta write that down because that is just great. He has taught me a lot about different crafting things that he's taken on. He bought a house and he's gardening, and he does tatting and lace work, bobbin lace, and he shows all kinds of different crafts. I mean, knitting is his primary hobby, but so go take a look. Dairyland Knits on YouTube. You can find Josh Brown. What am I going to start with today? Well, let's start with what I'm wearing. I finished my Felix sweater, and this is a chunky, almost bulky, chunky weight sweater knit on large needles. So a friend said, I know someone who knit it in a day and a half, and I was like, I'm all in on that. It took me 2 weeks because I've got work going on, and I had to knit a couple of hats in there. But another reason that it took me longer is because I made it a dress. So I had extra yarn, and I've done a light blocking because I didn't want it to grow too much. And I kind of noticed that some of my stitches didn't relax perfectly. So I might have to get it a little more wet because sometimes I don't completely wet it if I don't want it to grow too much. So I'd done the towel method that I talked about on the podcast a little bit. And it goes down to mid-thigh. I had an entire bag of this yarn. This is Ella Ray Superwash Chunky, which is discontinued, but you can still find it in the back of a lot of yarn stores, in that back room, you know, where yarn goes to die or to go to heaven. So I had a bag of it, 10 skeins at least, and I thought, oh, I'm not going to make this a short sweater because I'm just not going to use very much of it. So it goes way down, and then I tried it on yesterday or 2 days ago after I blocked it and it had dried, and I didn't like it. I looked like the Pillsbury Doughboy in it with like little stubby legs. It was too long. I'm short, and so I thought I'll just use up quite a bit of the yarn. And I had measured another knitted dress that I have, so I knew how long to make it, and I kept saying to myself, it's fine, you can make it a little longer, use up the yarn, you can make it a little longer. Not so much when you're 5'3". So I ripped it out yesterday, ripped the ribbing off, ripped back probably 2 or 3 inches, and then re-knit the ribbing, and I did a split hem at the bottom of it. I thought maybe it wouldn't pull in quite as much at the bottom if the ribbing was separated, and I like it better. I took a picture, so I will insert that here. Hopefully I will remember to get that picture in. I just stood in the kitchen earlier and took a picture of it so you could see what it looks like. But it has these yarn over increases, and it's one of those sweaters that has that extra long raglan. So I adjusted for that. Maybe not quite enough. It's not bad, but I maybe could have done one less of the repeats. It's not riding up on me too high. Like I said, I haven't worn it till today. So, and we had 6 inches of snow again yesterday. That's why I'm looking out the window. It is piled up under my window to the height of my window of my house, and there's so much snow. We can't shovel it any higher. If I can, after I get this recorded, I will run out to the end of the driveway and have my husband take a picture because it's over my head, the pile that he's snow blowed up. Crazy. So I'll try not to be distracted by, it's really sunny today. That's why I decided it'd be really nice to podcast. It's a Sunday afternoon. I usually podcast on Monday, but I have book club tomorrow, and I've missed my last 2 book clubs because my Mondays have gotten busy and I haven't been able to go. So I said I'm going to record this afternoon and edit tomorrow morning and then be able to go to book club, and I have a couple of people that I need to meet with tomorrow. So we're just going to kind of threw a little loop in things for me, but on your end it won't look any different. It'll still be up there by Tuesday. So I have an announcement to make. The irocknits design cal, if you knit anything in the month of January or February, I am Walton, Amanda from Ohio. You won the $25 gift card, the Etsy gift card. So Amanda, get in touch with me so I can have, I'm thinking an email address is what I'm going to need to send that. I think that's how Etsy delivers their gift cards. And I've opened the new thread for March and April. So anything you knit that's an irocknits design in March and April, you can enter in that. There weren't a lot of entries, so your chances of winning are pretty good. And the cal, I give away an Etsy gift card, so you can use it for anything that's available. So Amanda, congratulations and thanks. You knit a beautiful Fiber Friend shawl. So that knit along is coming to an end because the Carolina Fiber Fest is coming up here in a couple of weeks, and that pattern is still available out on the Carolina Fiber Fest website under the 2019 festival. You drag the bar down and it's under craft along, and then you scroll down. There are 3 patterns there that are for free, so go out and get those, because once the festival happens, then I get my pattern back, and then it will be for sale on my website. So it'll only be free through the end of, right toward the end of March, I get it back. I'm not sure of the exact date, but there's a contract. So when the festival's over, then that following week, I can put it up on Ravelry for sale. So the next thing I'd like to talk about is a knit along that is happening on Ravelry as well as on Patty Lyon's website. And it is for the Roselle Tea, and it is using Valley Yarns Granville, which is a 90% cotton, 10% wool blend yarn that you can get on discount. Patty Lyons is an amazing, very knowledgeable instructor. She has had video tutorial knit-alongs for the last 4 years. 1 a year, and she's had hundreds of people do the knit along. this year, Christy Glass, who has interviews on YouTube, informational snippets on YouTube, most of you will know who I'm talking about, has decided to join Patty in the knit along. And today, or yesterday, they posted a informational video about gauge swatching, because Christy did a gauge swatch last week and Patty took a look at it and said, we need to talk. And my beginner knitters from the library, who are no longer beginners, and I need to quit calling them beginners, my library knitters have been knitting with me, some of them, for a year now. And they've taken intermediate knitting and color work knitting, and they've learned lappy and braid, so they are no longer beginners, but in my head I keep using beginners. Several of them are thinking about doing this knit along, because I reached out to them and I said, I would knit along with them. If they were interested, I would buy the yarn and knit along. I think the yarn runs shy of $50 for the entire sweater, and then the pattern is $10, but you can get a coupon code by using Roselle KG on Ravelry. I think you get $1 off if you, and you can find that on Christy's YouTube channel. So for a relatively inexpensive, amount of money, relatively, speaking, you can knit along. You get a clue every 2 weeks starting April 1st. There are 4 clues. You have 2 weeks to complete them. You can do it at your own pace. You do not have to keep up. But then Patty has videotaped certain features of the sweater to go along with the knit along. So she's teaching as you're knitting this. It has lace sleeves. It's a short sleeved, scoop necked, scoop in front and back t-shirt with a high pleated little opening in the front that has lace in it, and you can reverse it, so you can wear the opening in the front or the back. It's not an opening, it's a pleat, but it's got lace on the inside. It's an inset, so she teaches you how to do that. She's going to walk you through all of that. I wouldn't say that this is for a new beginner, but if you are adventurous beginner, Patty's going to walk you through so much of this knit along that I just really wanted to encourage some of my knitters who wanted to take that leap into first sweater, second sweater, third sweater, but the first 2 didn't turn out. This might be a way for you to get some help with those tricky parts, the tricky bits. There's not a lot of lace. You can do it without the pleat in the front. I believe you can make it plain on the front and the back if you choose to. So anyway, Patty Lyons, you go to Roselle T on Ravelry, you buy the pattern, you get an immediate PDF that does not have all the information in it about how to knit it, but then it tells you how to get your yarn for cheaper. So just wanted to mention that today. Okay, I had lots of questions this week, but here's another tip or trick that I wanted to share with people. I use this website quite a bit. It's called knitable.net, and it's an older, kind of like me, older website that has knitting calculators on it. So if you need to calculate yardage to do something, how to calculate how to make buttonholes, how far apart to put your buttonholes, or how to calculate increases and decreases, like if you need to calculate how many decreases you're going to do down a sleeve, and you're starting at this number, you get to this number, it helps you with all of that. So you can go over to Knittable. It's a free website, knittable.net, and it has knitting calculators for yardage, buttonholes, increases and decreases. There used to be an app that you could get, but it's been taken down because I think they're redeveloping it to sell. It was free, and I think that's why they took it down. It's because they're going to sell it now, which is fine, right? You can't get everything for free. Oh, I mean, we all want it for free. And then another thing that I went out and purchased in the last couple weeks was that new Knit How book. And I shared this with my beginners, my advanced knitters from the library. But this is by Pom Pom Magazine, and it is wonderful. It's got, you know, excellent pictures in it, projects, everything you need to know about learning how to knit, but also kind of step-by-step through some projects. And so we're going to pick a couple out of this to knit too, coming up. So you might want to get your hands on the Knit How book. Oh, one more thing. I bought one more thing, okay? I don't like this to be a podcast where I show you stuff I buy or whatever, because I get tired of feeling like I want to buy everything that everyone has. And you can't buy this anyway, I don't think. So I went out to Zulily before we went to Virginia Beach and saw that they had these pajamas out on Zulily. And I think they're sold out. And I think there was at one time a date that they're going to get them back in, but I don't think they're available right now. Isn't that great? It's not hoarding if it's yarn. So I got them on Zulily. Now you got to be careful with Zulily, because if you don't get your size right, you can't return stuff to Zulily. They're kind of crazy. They sucker you in and then. But I ordered a pair for Amber and for myself, and they didn't come in time. They came the Tuesday after we got home, or Monday after we got home from Virginia Beach. So she and I are going to have matching pajamas. Well, because the yarn hoarder had to have hoarding. She doesn't wear pajamas. I think she's a t-shirt girl, but whatever. I bought them for them. So you could go out and look and watch for that if you're a pajama person, and you could see if they're going to get those back in. Because you know how sometimes on those websites where they're selling out overstock stuff, they'll have a little button that says when it's going to be available again or not. Okay, let's get into some questions today. Miss Fitzy asked me what to do to fix the top of her middle field pullover. She reached out on Ravelry. She had a question. It fit great before she washed it. How many of us have had that happen in our past, right? It fits great, and then you have to launder it, and then it doesn't fit anymore. And that is why you need to wash your gauge swatch, because you need to see how the yarn is going to behave. I know gauge swatching isn't fun, but you need to wash your gauge swatch so you know how it's going to behave. However, she was okay with how it turned out, except the yoke was garter. The yoke is ribbed, and then there's some garter, and one area grew more than the other area. So she's feeling like it's sloppy up here. And so she asked me if I would talk a little bit more about the crochet chain to add support. And I briefly mentioned that. I mentioned it a couple of times, and I could do a tutorial on it, but there's already a couple out there, so I'm going to share that with you. If you go to the Yarn Harlot, February 24th of 2008, she has a blog post called Hooking Because I Have To, and it's excellent. So I printed it out because I'm going to put it in my Teaching Intermediate Knitters folder. So this is what the Yarn Harlot's website looks like. There's the blog post. And I printed it out, and she shows you step by step how to pick up and do a crocheted supportive stabilizing row of knitting, just like I did when I put the cotton piece of yarn through the back and the shoulders of Amber's sweater when we were in Virginia Beach. The cotton piece of yarn is just faster, right? So you can just pull it through there, cinch it up, put it on and see if it works. Then if it works well, you can, tie knots on either end, but you can get a little pull mark where that knot is tied, to kind of anchor it. So your best bet really would be to go back and do a single crochet, kind of a chain in there. And she shows you step by step what to go into, how it's going to look when you're done, where you would do it. So it's a great. I just find a lot of times people ask me questions and they want to see it, and then I think, okay, I should make a YouTube video for how to do it, and then I Google it on YouTube and it's already there. Because people have been doing that. I mean, this is from 2008, so it's not new information. I'm not saying that you should have all the information, because none of us know everything there is to know about knitting. I mean, every time I take a class, I learn something new, but if you don't have the opportunity to take a class, You're not going to know that. So, and if you're a new knitter, you don't even know what to call it in order to Google it. So I totally get that, because I would not have called this hooking, because I have to in order to find it. But in order to do that crocheted, reinforced seam across the back of something or around the neck of something, on the shoulders of something, you can go to her website. And she's yarnharlot.com .ca, because she's in Canada. And I would assume that everybody knows who she is, but she has had probably one of the most popular knitting blog posts for 100 years, right? Like she's been doing a blog for years. She's very funny. She's written several books, so I'm gonna assume that most of you can go out and look, and if you don't know who she is. Okay, then M's Little Nest asked me how to seam her Anhenga sweater. So one of the first sweaters I showed on this podcast was the Anhenga, and it had it's similar to what Patty Lyons is doing. It has this spot right here where you get this cross your heart, and then there's this open, I'm gonna call it a peplum, but I guess it's a peplum. It's not in the back though. It's like a pleat, and it has this little area. But when you knit that, you knit it going this way, and so you have to seam that in. And she has you, Nora Gone is the designer of that pattern. She has you seam that with the seam on the outside, so it's visible. And so she didn't know how to do that. And so what I said is, I think I just put my other sides together and did the mattress stitch and then turned it over to look at it. And so I looked up a couple of YouTube videos for her too, to see, because if you don't know how to mattress stitch on the reverse side, on the reverse stockinette side, or depending, then you might need to look at those. So Roxanne Richardson has some of the best videos out on YouTube for knitting. She doesn't always come up as the top person as far as viewers go. I'm not sure why, but just scroll down a couple. And I put the links for this in the Ravelry thread. So when I answer a question on the podcast, just so all of you know, I answer you on the Ravelry thread. Like, I try to go in. I'm a lot better at talking than I am at writing it out. Let's just be clear. However, I do write it out in the Ravelry thread and try to give you an answer to your question and some links or a tutorial or an explanation in a paragraph form for how I would do something. And I honestly don't have all the answers, but I try to look things up or find them for you. So this particular post is toward the end because I'm caught up with the questions. And you could go and just click over to the 2 YouTube links that I gave her for the Anhenga. Okay, so you can get the answer there for how I seamed that, because I wrote it out. Okay, Randa, you have a question about buttons on sweaters and laundering. And I didn't answer this one very well. Because number one, I don't launder my sweaters all that much, but she has a superwash sweater that is stretching out of shape when she wears it, and then she needs to launder it or at least dry it, you know, spritz it and dry it to kind of, here's my word again, zhuzh it up a little, kind of, you know, make it smaller, get back some of its body, and the buttons are causing her a problem. So she's taking the buttons off, laundering it, and then putting the buttons back on. That's a lot of work. Another reason I probably wouldn't launder it that often. But if it's too stretched out of shape, you know, then that's kind of what you have to do. And that's the same thing that would happen with Amber's, is that hers just got a little, it was oversized, but it also got a little too drapey and a little stretched out. So my first response was sew or glue your button on a snap, because then you can just take the snap off, leave the little hardware for the snap, which would be lighter in weight, and then put the snap back on when after you launder it. That would be my number one thing. She used a lingerie bag. She did try using a lingerie bag, but only parts of the sweater dried. So you know how that they get kind of compact. You might just need a much larger lingerie bag, you know, because sometimes they're only this big and you're trying to shove a sweater in them. So you might need to go to Amazon and see if you can't get a larger, like a pillowcase size one for a sweater. Maybe that would dry it better for you. Otherwise, my other thought was to ask you guys, does anybody have a really great idea for buttons that are too heavy for a sweater? So if she washes it and dries it, they stretch out the sweater because they're hanging on the fabric and they're not supportive enough. I did recommend reinforcement behind the button. That might just help. If you put little squares of bias tape, I've seen a couple people do that on the back of a sweater, or another button on the back of that button hole, it might help to hold that in place. I was also thinking those clips, those plastic, black, big plastic, maybe you could clip the button to that part of the sweater. Oh, that's just, I don't know. That sounds like a hot mess, but I was really trying. Man, I was really trying to come through for you with an idea for that one. Oh, here's some more great tips and tricks for you guys. Okay, this is something that I was putting away on the desk this week, and then I left it out because I wanted to show you guys. This is 12 names for your yarn balls, and it's from interweave.com, so you can go out and print it out for yourself. But especially for my intermediate knitters, because they're beyond maybe just buying an actual ball of yarn, but to not know what things are called, right? To go into the yarn store and maybe the yarn store owner uses a word that you're unfamiliar with. So these are the 12 names. Hank, folded hank, twisted hank, skein. Twisted hank and skein are the same thing. Apparently when you lay one down flat on it changes its name. I'm just kidding. But twisted hank and skein. I cracked myself up and it wasn't even that funny. A pole skein, a bullet skein, a ball, a cake, a donut ball, a hardcore ball. I had never heard of that before, but it has a hard core. So it's not a hardcore ball. It has a hard core, meaning it has the cardboard on the inside of it. Okay, there. A cone. And then we've all had a hank and skein, right? I call it a hot mess skein. We've all had that before. So this is just a really nice visual. Someone could do that up in color and frame it. It would be kind of nice. But anyway, that was a nice feature. And then I had a Instagram post this week from someone who is trying to design a sweater, I think for the first time, and they were looking for measurements. It is really hard to find standard measurements on the internet because what you find are there are sewing measurements and then there are some hand knit measurements, which the Craft Yarn Council has a page of standard measurements for garments for hand knitters. But Pink Brutus Knits has compiled, Courtney Spainhauer has compiled an entire list of women's measurements, basic measurements, and juniors measurements, and she charges $1 for this. So you can go to pinkbrutus.com, and it has armhole depth, armhole to waist, back neck, front neck, garment back, hip, neck. Some of you are thinking, why would I want that, Corey? Right? I'm not going to design anything. Well, here's the deal. You can go through this and circle yours. That's why you want it, because then you know, then you have all your measurements somewhere. And you can take a picture of it with your phone, and then no matter where you're at, no matter what you're knitting on, you can remember that your sleeve length for a 42 women is 16.75. But I'm not a 42 woman in my sleeve length, but I need a longer sleeve. You can so much with this, right? Because it's got your sizes across the top, and then you can find yourself, and you'll go back and forth. No one's going to go down one column ever and have all those numbers fit in for them, right? Because nobody's that average. But done a good job of compiling data and averaging it out. That's what she's done. Taken all kinds of numbers and averaged it out. And so this is always on my desk. It'd be really helpful for some of you, especially like that armhole depth number was really hard to find. When I was writing the book with Megan, the Minnesota 52 book, there were some numbers that we just couldn't find, and we were trying to do our sweater. We were trying to make sure that our sweaters were designed for small to, extra large. We want to be size inclusive. We want to make sure we're accurate, and some of those numbers were hard to find, and I think that's why some designers kind of winging it. Not in a bad way, they can't find the number. So they're just like, well, if I'm a 10, the person above me is probably an 11, and the person above that's probably a 12, which is not always true, right? So that's what Amber and Diane, Suburban Stitcher, hi Diane, are knitting that party top. And last week, Diane finished hers, and the neckline's too big. And so several people immediately reached out to Amber because they knew she was knitting it and said, Amber, your neck might be too big. So then Amber and I talked yesterday, and she said she wasn't home. She was driving, so I was just visiting with her on a drive. And she said, Corey, I think I cast on 156 stitches for that neck. And I said, I went out to Ravelry then, looked at the projects that I was trying to see if people commented that neck hole opening was too big. And one of the people who made a small cast on 90 stitches. 90 to 156, even if Amber was wrong, and it's 136, that's a huge difference in neck hole opening size. And if you would stand 10 different sized women up in a row, most of their necks are going to be about the same size. Right? You can have a thick neck, but most of us are not going to have a significantly bigger neck than the people around us, right? Like a 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch, but not full inches jumping up, right? Not 2 inches bigger, 4 inches bigger, 6 inches bigger, right? And that's where I think that pattern might have a problem. I'm not sure. I'm not calling out that person. I'm just saying that this neck opening starts at 6 and goes to the biggest size, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 sizes, 2.5 inches, right? This is probably more accurate. That number probably was not available for the designer, so the designers had to go up. So that's why I think maybe, and I'm not sure, maybe that might be why that neck hole is too big for, maybe the above average and up sizes. People with a bust larger than, a 40. It might be getting too big too quick. I just go off on these tangents like I have so much to say to you. You just have to sit there and wait for me to come around to the actual point of this podcast, which is to talk about a sweater and a shawl today. Okay, I'm going to try to be more on task. How am I going to do this? Because I had a little light, I have a little shadow today. So I'm going to turn this one out of the way, and we're going to just talk about this one, because then I think you can see it. Yeah, this is going to work. The sweater of the day today is the Cloisonné jacket. This is from Interweave Knits of fall of 2010, and this was my Ravelry game project for the Summer Olympics right after. So the Ravelry Games used to be called the Ravelympics, and then they got in trouble from the Olympics Committee, so they had to change it. So they matched it with the Hellenic Games, which are the original Greek games that were the predecessor of the, now what we call the Olympics. So it's called the Ravelry Games. And when that comes around every year, winter and not every year, every 2 or 4 years, whatever. Try to keep up my mouth with my brain. Okay, so that comes around, as it does, and they have contests on Ravelry, so you can join, and you can knit a hat, knit socks, knit a sweater, but you're supposed to encourage yourself to stretch your limits like the athletes are doing. That's the premise of the whole contest, is to, go beyond, above and beyond. So you cast on during the opening ceremonies, and then you knit like the wind until you get to the closing ceremonies, and you just try to be finished by the closing ceremonies. So this is the jacket that I decided to cast on during the opening ceremonies, and then I did get it finished by the closing ceremonies except for the zipper. It is a worsted weight, 18 stitch to 4 inches, bottom up, buttoned. I didn't button mine. Positive ease, 3/4 length sleeved, worked flat, not in the round, so you're doing this bit of color work on the back side. It's an A-line jacket, and the pattern does include plus sizes, so 38, 42, 46, 50, and 54. This was the color that the jacket was shown in. Again, blue and brown. If you've been with me for a while, you're gonna get that joke. So I loved it because of the colors, but if you can't visualize this in light gray and dark gray, or pink and cream, or red and black, go out on Ravelry, because there are some beautiful jackets. This is a buttoned up, nice fitting, more professional jacket. You could wear this with a skirt to a work event, especially with the buttons on it. I made it a little more sporty because I added the zipper later, but that just suited my lifestyle. It's got a garter stitch, rolled back, set in sleeve, and then you've got this lace detail down here. So you've got this fairly easy to knit, you know, just little V, kind of a lace. Makes the bottom a little wavy. And then I had the zipper put in here with some, and then it's partly, now, if you don't want to do color work, you wouldn't have to on this, right? You could have a solid sweater with a little lace under. It would be really cute. I might have to knit that up that way again so that I have another option for this. I really loved the 3/4 length sleeve with the little, you have 2 rows of garter stitch right here, and then you have this really nice lace, you know, cuff kind of sticking out. I carried around a piece of this blue yarn in my wallet for 2.5 years before I found this t-shirt. I didn't want to wear brown underneath it. I wanted to wear blue. And so I took a piece of the yarn. I have a piece of yarn in my wallet right now because I need a turtleneck to match a sweater. And I just carried it in my wallet, and I look, you know, where I'm at. I look to see if I have something that would match, you know, a turtleneck or a shirt or whatever I'm trying to match it with. And that's how I ended up finding this at the farm supply store, because my daughter and I were out, because she has a horse, and we're at that's one of her favorite places on earth, is the farm supply store. They have clothing, so they had, you know, they had plaid shirts, and they had jeans, and they had this t-shirt in there, and thank goodness that I had that little piece of yarn with me that day, because I was like, that is the perfect color to match that. So this is the Cloisonné jacket. I didn't do much different to it. When you do this color work in this section, it's probably gonna pull in a little bit. So it's going to do some waist shaping for you, which is, you know, wonderful. I think you can see right over there on that side that it does, you know, it does pull in just a slight bit. Oh, there we go. That must be a thing that I say. You do, because I've done that before on this podcast. You do execute the color work on the back side, but that does not mean that you couldn't knit this in the round and steek it. You absolutely could knit, and it's not very much, right, that you're steeking, just from this section up to this section. And you're knitting this bottom up, and then you just, it's not sewn on, so it's one piece. So the construction of it is not difficult at all. But I really like it. Lots of people try this on in my workshops and are, you know, talk about knitting it afterwards. I don't know how many of them actually go out and knit it, but it's probably one of my favorites. I don't wear it a ton because I feel like it's my fall sweater, because it's a 3/4 length sleeve one, and you know, we get so miserably cold here in Minnesota that it's not the warmest sweater. But honestly, if I put, you know, something else underneath it, it would probably be a little warmer. So that's the cloisonné. It has this little button clasp right up there originally, and then I put the zipper in. But you could absolutely pick up and do a button band on the front of that if you chose to. So that's your sweater of the day today. I'm going to try to move the other mannequin over here without upsetting the apple cart. How close can I get it to me? There we go. There we go. Yeah. I'm so good at this. Not. Watch me knock her right over. Okay. Today's shawls of the day are faux shawls. F-A-U-X, not finished objects. I wonder if a little kid in elementary school that had to do homonyms could use faux and faux. F-O, my mom's a knitter, and F-A-U-X, right? Did you have to ever do that? Your teacher would collect them and you put them on the board and everybody had to come in with a different one? So and so, S-O and S-E-W, you know, and you cut it. And they're, you know, every day someone would come in with a new one, you put it up on the board. Memories. I don't know why that popped into my head. Okay, so this is the Appia and the Star Shower and the Adama. So I printed these out for you so you could see what they're called. This is Appia, A-P-P-I-A by Hilary Smith Callis. I originally, years ago, so this was written in 2014, but before that, I could swear that people called her Hilary Smith Calais. So I could have that wrong. C-A-L-L-I-S. I've never met her. Never seen her as a teacher either. I wonder if they have, you know, on Ravelry they have that little, you can hit the button and it'll pronounce it for you. But you have to record that in. I wonder if she has that recorded in there. Anyway, Hilary Smith, C-A-L-L-I-S. So she has all of these. This is the Star Shower. And then this is the Adama. I don't have an Adama, but I want one. It's the worsted weight version. So it's much bigger. You can wear it over your shoulders. You can pull it down over your shoulders. Although I can pull these down too. They can come off your shoulders. So it's a cowl that's hooked together in the back to look like a great big shawl. So you don't have those ends. You don't have to fuss with it. You can throw it on over your head and walk out the door. Each of these are $5 on Ravelry, and the Star Shower was knit with Anzula, and so I think that was a club that they did, or a kit that they did. Anzula is that really extraordinary kind of high-end beautiful yarn, and it was sparkly, and so I think that's why she has 2 in fingering weight, but they're knit at different gauges. So the Appia is knit at 16 stitches to 4 inches in fingering weight on a 6. So 4 stitches to the inch. You're knitting that like a shawl, right? Very loosely. And then the Star Shower is 19 stitches to 4 inches on a 6. So not nearly as big a kind of gauge, but I think that's because that Anzula fiber was a thicker fingering weight, which we've talked about before, right? We never used to have light fingering, and heavy fingering, or light worsted, and heavy worsted, and now we do because of the put-ups at the mills. And I talked about that in another podcast. So we have 3 of these. I knit one and then gave it away, and then I wanted to talk about it in my shawl class because a friend, hi Dawn of Wolf Farms, knit this one for me years ago. And so I had hers, and so I had a sample knitter knit this one. And I'm going to show you the problem that I see with all of these shawls and maybe the fix. Okay, so I'm going to put that one on there so you can kind of see what I'm talking about here, because this one it's not as bad. Here's the problem. right? Garter tab. If you do not successfully execute the garter tab, you can get a bump on the top of your flat shawls or like on this cowl. Now, this one could be blocked out flatter, but I'm doing that with my fingers and then this doesn't make it flat. So when I pull this, it can't go flat enough, right? There is a YouTube tutorial out there, on a better execution of the garter tab, but here's the problem. You cast on 2 or 3 and you knit 6 rows and then you pick up around that garter tab. That's how a garter tab construction works. If you do not pick up enough stitches around the tab, you can't make the tab go flat. If you pick up too many stitches, then you have too much fabric in there. So it has to be the right ratio. I'm not sure what that ratio is. I've not designed a shawl that started with a garter tab. I just know that I have fixed it by, after knitting the first couple of rows, going, oh, this is causing a bump. I need to go, and you can move sometimes 2 or 3 rows into the pattern and start, and that takes away some of it. Like if you would have just started at this section where there are all of a sudden 12 stitches on the needle, that can work. So this particular one, it doesn't bother me because I just fold it down when I wear it and you would never know that it's there. But I wanted to talk about it today because I've seen people taking pictures of their shawls and they lay them out flat and then the, semicircle or half circle, and then they've got this whoop at the top of it. And that's the cause of it, is the execution of that garter tab. I don't know the physics, it's not really physics, the math behind that ratio. It's more math, I think, behind that ratio of pick up to cast on. Like if you make it longer and pick up more, if that makes it more flat, or if you need fewer. But I watched a video on it, so I know there's a video out there, and I'll link that in the show notes for how to pick it up and make it sit flatter so that you can all see that. So we have the Appia on a 6, fingering weight 16. We have the Adama on a 9, worsted 15, and we have the Star Shower on a 6, 19 stitches. So it can go down over the shoulders, but those are the numbers on those. Okay, I had an interruption. The husband had to feed the dog. And he was banging around in the kitchen and running the water, and I was like, what's going on? I said I was recording. So anyway, I had to pause, and anyway, I reset. I had a finished object this week, and I usually don't share them on the podcast, but we had talked about this previously on the podcast, so I thought, oh, I'm gonna quick grab it and bring it in because I was looking at it on the kitchen counter just now. So I grabbed my glass head. This is my favorite dog park hat. This is the warmest hat I've ever had. I've worn it every day for years because it has felted itself. I've washed it and dried it, and it's gotten stiff and hard, and it comes down and covers up my ears, but there are 2 layers of chunky fabric here, and it's called the Alpine Topper, which I believe I brought up on the podcast before when I talked about being, so bitter cold here. But if you have just somebody who has to shovel occasionally or be outside, or you have children, it's written for, I think, 3 sizes. And I used Malabrigo Chunky to make myself a new one because I've been wearing this one forever, and I washed it a week ago, and I was like, oh my goodness, this one, the little brim flips up, but when I put it on, it stays down. So I knit this one. This is the same hat. It's never been worn, and I blocked it pretty aggressively, but I haven't worn it yet because I wanted to show it to you guys. So it has this top, and when I got done with it, I was like, I better have enough of the yarn, because I had this bright green and this variegated, to make another one. And so I did. And I had a little bit of yarn left over for both of them. So it is just knit 2, knit 1, knit 2, knit 1, or knit 3, knit 1 for the whole, and it just spirals as you come around. And then you just close it up. So it's a very fast knit. You have double thickness of your yarn where you're carrying your floats, the part of your ears. And I ended up getting out of 2 skeins of chunky weight. Now, I don't have chunky weight. 2 skeins of worsted held double, or 2 worsted and a fingering, or 3 fingerings, 4 fingerings. You know, you could make this happen all on your own if you chose to, or an Aran and a fingering, because it's just you're gonna just check your gauge, and it's gonna just turn out, you know, a little bit bigger. I like it because it's very tight fitting. It's been very warm. It hasn't gotten sloppy over time. And so now I can't decide which one I like better, because you know what? They're gonna see me in a snowstorm if I wear the lime green one instead of this one. But I finished it in the last week or so, and I thought, oh, I'm gonna bring it and show it to you guys quickly on the podcast. So I had also printed this off today. I had a knitter ask me about counting rows in my daily life, not on Ravelry. And so I said I remembered reading a great tutorial on counting rows and how to count rows. And when I went out and looked at it, ironically, look at who wrote the blog post. Patty Lyons. So the same gal who was doing the knit along does a blog on her website, but she also answers Dear Knitter Teacher questions or something on Mason-Dixon Knitting every week. So you can go out and read all of her recent, but she did a really interesting post on, do you count the cast on row, and is it 1, 2, or is it 1 or 1, 2, 3? And she did all of the, and I don't really want to steal her work, so I'm not going to give it all away, you know, because that just seems wrong. But it's out there. So it's a Tuesday tip, how to count rows, and it's well worth a read. It's, you know, 4 pages, but big print. And then she's a very good teacher. Does a really nice job with instruction and explaining things. Then I had one more question, and I'm kind of keeping it until last year, so we're going to finish up. I had someone ask me about using Woolite when I commented that I don't use Woolite on my podcast a couple weeks ago or whatever. And she said, I've used Woolite for years, why can't you use it? So I said, well, I better go out and look. I found a bunch of information on it. This one's called Dirty Work, How to Clean Your Hand Knits. I will link all these in the show notes, but I printed them out for my intermediate knitter folder because I teach them something new every week. And so her comment was, the same instinct that tells you not to wash your hair with detergent applies to yarn as well. Such hard soaps can be, you know, damaging to the fibers. And then this person said, how to wash your hand knits. And they did a whole bunch of information on how to actually wash your hand knits and what different kinds of wool wash to use. And they said, don't use Woolite, word for word in this one. And then on another blog post, I found someone who said it's completely, absolutely fine to use Woolite. So then I got back to this woman and I said, I probably misspoke because I'm not a chemist. I heard, read, saw somewhere that you shouldn't use Woolite on your hand knits, so I never did. And then I passed that information along as true and accurate, and it might not be. I did find websites to support my data, but then on the other hand, I found a website that didn't support my data. So you know how that is, right? They tell you that when you're researching things and you're trying to prove your point, that you can always find things to support your data. So that question came from St. Clarion on Ravelry. She wrote it to me several weeks ago, and I responded with a long answer to her and quoted several of these different sources so that she could go out and read for herself. I kind of felt like I got down to the I'm still right. I think you shouldn't use it. It's harsher than it could be. But why do they call it woolite then? Yeah. I don't have all the answers to all the questions. And sometimes I have an opinion that may or may not be accurate. So I just wanted to put that out there. I printed out 2 interesting articles that I thought were very, logical, had a lot of background information that I didn't know about. But if it's a harsh detergent, and I don't have any, I probably could look up the ingredients on the internet. I don't have any to look at right now to say, oh, this is what's in it and this is why it's probably not good for your hand knits. So chime in. Go out to that post. If some of you have knit something and washed it in woolite and it wrecked your garment, we need to know. Like, we want to know right away. And if some of you have been using it for years and it's never hurt a thing, then we probably could know that as well. Okay, I have one last little thing to show you today before we finish. Do you guys remember when we were talking about enamel pins? And I said I have all these enamel pins and I put them on a bag, and then the bag got heavy, and I'm really worried about using that bag because they'll fall off, and I don't like to carry it now because I put so many on 2 sides of it that it got super heavy. Well, I have a friend, a dear friend, who is learning how to quilt. Look at what she made me. She brought it to knitting this week. And I didn't want to cover up all her work with my pins, so I wanted to show you all. And now I'm going to take my pins and I'm going to cover it all up. Isn't that awesome? It's totally Corey colors, completely quilted, and I don't sew, so to me it's perfect. She said, I'm just learning. I've never done the squiggle thing before. I don't even know what you call it. And I just think it really warmed my heart because I was obviously complaining, as I want to do. No one at my funeral is ever going to say she was so stoic and she never complained. Not gonna happen. If there's something going on with me, everybody knows about it because it's coming out my mouth. So thank you, Karen. I really, really love it. And all my beautiful enamel pins, I ordered a new Gigi made it one this week because she's been out every time I've gone over to buy one, and she's my girl because orange, right? I did orange this time. And it meant a lot. So I'm going to conclude today with a joke that I heard at church this morning. So a Doberman Pinscher and a German Shepherd and a cat are at the pearly gates. I hope you like a pet. And the Doberman Pinscher steps up to St. Michael and the Lord, and they say, what have you done to deserve coming through the pearly gates? And the Doberman Pinscher said, I've been loyal and a constant companion, and I've been a protector to my human. And the Lord says, you may sit at my right side. And then the German Shepherd comes through the gate, and the German Shepherd says, I have been honorable and a protector, and I have been strong and fierce in my determination, and I've been a loyal companion to my human. And the Lord says, you may sit at my left side. And the Lord looks down at this little cat and says to the cat, and the cat says, you're in my seat. Until next time, keep it colorful and keep in touch. Bye.